and we'll get started here in a moment. I want to thank you for joining us pretty early here. I'm looking forward to the conversation. I know a few folks may have been in our last webinar, less than an hour. It started at 6. So I really appreciate anyone who's joining us now. Elizabeth Johnson out in Destin, Florida. Thank you. Janice Ziedelman. And if I'm making sure, I want to make sure I'm pronouncing that correctly. Down in San Antonio, Countdown City, as they call themselves sometimes. Really appreciate it. And we're excited to have you, Elizabeth. We should have a good conversation here with longtime organizer, activist, Enchanta Jackson, here with Civic Tech and Running Mate. I spent some time down in Florida. I really enjoyed myself. Great people down there. I've also spent some time in San Antonio and I also really enjoyed my time there. The Riverwalk was great. Courtney with Sojo out in Kalispell, Montana. Always appreciate your assistance, and she'll be the person to connect with once our webinar ends. So once again, feel free to make yourself comfortable. We'll start here in earnest in about 5 minutes. Just want to make sure to greet people as we prepare to begin. As our webinar goes on, we're going to be discussing some of the challenges in this upcoming election cycle, some of the ways in which we can get involved, some of the ways we can make sure our neighbors get involved. So I'm really looking forward to that conversation. Throughout our webinar today, we're going to be asking questions around participation. So please feel free to use the chat or the question and answer function in order to participate. We want to make sure that we are being interactive today in our webinar. As folks begin to trickle in. Once again, please feel free to share in the chat your name, where you're calling in from. Looking forward to the conversation. I know it's been an action-packed couple of days so far in the week, so looking forward to connecting with folks in order to discuss this upcoming election. Terry in Portland, thank you for joining us from the Pacific Northwest. Spent a little time in the Portland area. Beautiful country, mountains, woods. So really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. I know you could be, yes, gorgeous trees. You could probably be outdoors somewhere at this moment, but you're here with us, and I really appreciate that. All right, Andrea in Nebraska. You may not believe this, but I've also spent some time in Nebraska. Uh, Lincoln, home of the Cornhuskers. Beautiful campus up there. All right. Gym in East Tennessee, another beautiful mountainous area. Uh, home of the Haley Farm, home of the Highlander Center. So a couple of great places for organizers, but also just some really nice folks as well. All right, so we're going to start here in just 1 minute. Again, please feel free to introduce yourself, and then we'll start in earnest for engage and adapt. Really looking forward to the conversation. So once again, as we begin here, please feel free to introduce yourselves, share your name, where you may be joining from throughout the webinar. We want to make sure that you're taking the time to do whatever you need in order to feel comfortable, do whatever you need in order to care for yourself. Jim in California, we appreciate you joining. So this is part of our Engage and Adapt webinar series. And so this is a space where we want to make sure we're practicing both lifting our voices in advocacy and our hands in help for our communities. This is a part of an ongoing series, and today I will be your moderator. My name is Chad Stanton. I'm the political director here at Sojourners, Sojo Action. I've been here about a year and some change now, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation today with a pretty smart and special organizer, Miss Enchanta Jackson, who is the director of Running Mates Partnerships and Programs at Civic Tech. Enchanta is a longtime organizer, someone who was a part of VYP 100, someone who has a long history of organizing on a relational organizing as well as digital organizing, founder of Black and Digital Advocacy, as well as the Bloom LLC. And a long time and like smart thinker who's also graduated from seminary at Union Theological. So I'm going to pause here and I'm going to let Enchanta say hello.
Thanks so much, Chad. Hello, everyone. As Chad mentioned, my name is Enchanta. Some campaign folks call me E. I have been campaigning for some time, mainly in Black and Brown communities. I've worked for the Obama campaign. I canvassed on Obamacare with Planned Parenthood Federation. And I worked with Chad at Color of Change, where I focused on district attorney races. I'm excited to be here and show you Running Mate later on in the presentation. Running Mate is a tool that was created by Civitech. It was created by Maddie and Jeremy, two campaigners and organizers who understood the importance of data and being able to reach out to their communities very quickly and easily. So I'm thrilled to be able to show you Running Mate here shortly. Also, just a tidbit about Sojourner, because this is a full circle moment for me. The first time I read Sojourner magazine was when I was an intern in Congresswoman Gwen Moore's office, and I would read it every day to get the latest news and see, what writers were talking about at that time. I've always admired Sojourner, so this is definitely a full circle moment. I'm so glad to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. We're really happy to have you. As mentioned in the chat, Courtney Brooks is here to help with support. So towards the end of the webinar, if you have any questions that may not have been answered, please make sure to share them with Courtney so that we can make sure to answer those. And I also want to give a shout out to our senior director, Reverend Harris, who's joined us as well. So again, looking forward to the conversation, and we can jump right into it now. All right. So just a little bit of level setting. We want to make sure to discuss today recent rulings by the Supreme Court and what they may mean for representation as well as the upcoming elections. what that may mean for redistricting. We also want to make sure we could to discuss how we can engage with decision makers on our behalf. And we also want to make sure to discuss how we can help our communities adapt to some of the ongoing changes in policy, as well as like politics and rhetoric that we're currently seeing. So right now, we're currently in a bit of a limbo space when it comes to some of the election changes. We've absorbed some of the changes from the rulings concerning racial gerrymandering, but we're going to discuss a few more of those in detail a little bit later. But some of those have been enormous changes to some of the congressional districts that people are voting in the upcoming elections. We've also seen a lot of challenges to the election process. Challenges to the mail-in balloting process at the national as well as some of the state level. And then we also have seen the Postmaster General make statements concerning some of the ways in which they plan to handle mail-in ballots. We're also seeing states move full steam ahead with reducing Black representation through redistricting, as well as other methods such as reducing polling places and cutting funding for election support. And we also know that we can engage with decision makers and serve directly in the electoral process to help shape what this upcoming election may look like, in spite of all of these attacks. All right. So I want to make sure to pause here, sorry, and give the opportunity to lift up any other changes folks may be concerned about, anything they may be seeing as we continue to build towards the next election. And feel free to add that in the chat or in our question and answer portion here. So what we want to do is we want to make sure to lift our voices, particularly in this moment. The right to representation was one of the hardest and most impactful legacies of the civil rights movement. From Reconstruction until today, it's been understood that the best protection against treating people unequally is by guaranteeing they have the power to at least partially determine their conditions. And we want to make sure that we're following in what the word says when we say that we want to defend the weak and fatherless, uphold the cause of the poor and oppressed, rescue the weak and needy, and deliver them from the hand of the wicked. And a big part of that is making sure that people have the ability to determine their own conditions. As someone who's been a seminary student, I definitely want to make sure to ask you and Shanta how some of your work is informed by that background as someone who's studied deeply on like the scripture and some of the scholarship informing it as well.
Yeah, thank you for asking that, Chad. I definitely used to separate my spirituality and faith from my organizing work. And I found that to be kind of ridiculous because at the end of the day, if you have faith, you believe in spirit, you believe that there's a divine power, and you're also doing advocacy work or organizing work, fighting for change, you want to embrace that belief in your faith in order to help keep you going. I know there's many times where I have felt completely burnt out and like I couldn't go on anymore. And it was only my faith and my understanding of spirit that helped me continue and also help remind me of my purpose, of my calling in this world. Some people feel their ministry is they're actual ministers, you know, like pastors and preachers. I feel like my ministry is social justice. I discovered as a young girl that social justice and racial justice was an organic passion of mine once I witnessed some racism and some injustice with our criminal justice system as a young person. And so every time I try to walk away from that calling, it continues to pull me right back in, even if I don't want to do it. So I definitely feel like it goes hand in hand. One of the things studying at Union Theological Seminary in particular Black liberation and womanism and womanist theology is understanding how your personal experience is part of your work. You are also part of the calling of needing liberation and justice, and so it's okay to center yourself. It's okay to center your people because you are part of the community. And also direct service work sometimes, especially in the faith community, we can get caught up with thinking direct service work is the only work there is to do. And I don't want to demonize direct service work. I think direct service work is very powerful and needed. But in addition to doing direct service work, we also need to be focused on creating social, structural, and systemic change in society. And so that's kind of my take on that.
Thank you. I really appreciate. Oh, I'm not sure if I'm muted or not, but no, I really appreciate the perspective. Um, and I want to turn to to you all and ask, what does this look like for you, right? When you're thinking about engaging, um, and and working to sway hearts and minds, um, what does engaging mean to you when you are engaging? What do you do when you're hoping to engage with someone and come into true dialogue? And then what are some of the things you notice when people are attempting to engage with you? I want to come back to these questions and ask you all, what does this mean in your everyday life and in your work? So I'm going to pause here, give some time for folks to answer in the chat here. In particular, I see Andrea. Thank you for joining us, Andrea. Please let me know if I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Discuss the fact that 25% of rural voters vote by mail, and many rural areas don't have a polling place. Um, and folks will have to drive 30 to 50 miles in order to get to one. And so we're going to discuss that a little bit more in depth a little bit later, but I do think being able to surface some of these concerns and understand them is a key when thinking about this current moment. So I really appreciate that answer, and hopefully it helps folks to think through like what does it mean to engage deeply with folks. But I want to make sure to pause for any other uh any other contributions here. All right. Now again, I want to make sure I'm pronouncing this correctly. Chi Karak Ampil says that engaging means paying attention to the threats and the faith-based responses to the threats to protect democracy. I like that answer. Reverend Harris says being engaged is knowing the problems that exist and then brainstorming on what could be done to make a difference. Another great answer, although probably cheating a little bit because she does this all the time. All right, and Gaston says that engaging in my experience is patience, practice not just outwardly but inwardly, consistent efforts to understand myself through others. And then Chi Chi once again says engaging means joining organizations, communities that are doing something. Okay, we're getting a few here. So I'm going to read one more and then we're going to move to the next slide. Janice says getting to know them and what their issues and needs are. Okay. All right. So we're starting to see some activity here in the chat. And so we'll make sure to share these answers in the chat as well in order to make sure to we can look at them later and then share some of the type of ones with everyone. Rick says engage means to really get to know how people who are being marginalized. Really getting to know the people who are being marginalized. Don't want to misstate Rick's contribution here, but really appreciate it. All right, so let's move forward. One of the things we want to make sure to emphasize that when we're engaging with leaders, it's important to tell both elected leaders and community leaders how we truly feel. We want to make sure, as Enchanta was speaking to, that our voice and our stories are understand our voice and our stories are important part of the ways people understand what's happening around them. And then when we engage with our community leaders, we want to make sure that they value the connection that we have with the people who listen to us, so the people who find us to be trusted communicators. Um, it's important that we're lifting up their concerns, but it's also important that decision makers understand that, you know, we're representing an entire community and not just ourselves. And it's also essential to be thoughtful in how we use the trust that is given to us by the community. So I wanted to make sure to lift up those important points when thinking about engaging. And want to pause here before we get into running mate to ask Enchanta if there's anything you may want to add here. Nope. All right. So let's talk about running mate. Here's one of the ways in which we can get engaged with each other as community leaders. And I'm going to stop here and let the expert take it away.
I don't know if I'm an expert, but I'm a strong believer in Running Mate. I wish I had a tool like this when I was organizing, especially in my earlier days of organizing, simply because it's such an easy to use tool, but there's a lot of different tools out there outside of Running Mate. I do just think in general, people need to use some type of targeting tool in order to be thoughtful about their time. So they're not, wasting a lot of time talking to voters that are outside of their demographics. Some highlights around Running Mate. Running Mate allows you to access constituent data, set voter registration and turnout goals, create canvassing and phone banking packets, track canvas and phone bank conversations, reach out to unregistered and recently moved voters, which is huge because folks who've recently moved, they have submitted a change of address form, but they haven't actually updated their voter registration. So you know these are people who believe in democracy enough to actually register to vote. It's just simply they need a reminder to update their voter registration. It allows you to build targeted demographic and outreach list. As I mentioned before, I used to work in various different campaigns. One was in Upper Darby Township in Pennsylvania, and at that time it was all Republican city council. This was back in 2013. It was all Republican city council, but the majority of people living in Upper Darby were Black and brown people. Our section of town spoke 80 different languages. It was one of the most diverse suburbs in Philadelphia. However, a lot of folks weren't registered to vote. And so when doing outreach there, we were focused on, okay, how can we make sure that folks who might be new to the community or unregistered to vote know about what's happening here, know that election day is coming up, and have the information they need to vote. With a tool like Running Mate, that could have been very simple to do, but unfortunately, we didn't have that tool at the time. Chad, I don't know if you mean to be playing with the presentation and yourself, but
Oh no, I was hoping to yeah, get it to center you. My bad. I apologize.
no worries, no worries. I don't know if folks can see, but it's actually where you are positioned in the presentation chat. I wanted to make sure they got the Running Mate link and the discount code. However, my coworker Gaston is on the call. Gaston, who you uplifted earlier today in the chat. He also works at Civitech with me, and we together partner on the Running Mate tool. And so you probably will see him in the chat answering any questions that folks might have. He'll also drop in the link if folks want to learn more about Running Mate. But I just wanted to show you Running Mate very quickly so you can see what possibilities there are out there if you're interested in doing targeted engagement. And I will share my screen. Okay, can everyone see my screen? Okay, give a thumbs up or heart in the chat if you don't mind. Okay, cool. All right. So, this is Running Mate. It's a very simple, easy to use map forward tool. It helps you actually visualize your data. So I pulled up Louisiana. This is a C3 tool. We have a C4 version. If you're interested in the C4 version, please email me at runningmate/support@civitech.io and we can talk about that later. But this is the C3 version. So it doesn't allow you to see party lines or anything like that, but it does allow you to see density. It updates in real time. So, for example, we're talking about Louisiana. We have several partners there, including Asian Americans Rise, and Louisiana Alliance, and say we wanted to focus in on a certain congressional district. Let's just say this is the most heavily populated district, which is District 1. The map updates in real time to let you know who is in that district, how many unregistered voters that district has, the turnout, likely turnout for that district, the race breakdown, age breakdown, sex breakdown. You can also scroll down even more and get into different demographics if you only wanted to speak with Latina voters. You could check that, and the map updates in real time. Another really cool feature that we have is this feature where basically you can create your own tags. So while you're out talking to people, if you wanted to tag people of certain denominations, I myself am AME. If you really wanted to organize AME folks, while you're having conversations with people, you can tag them as AME and then pull them up here on the map so you can see in real time where your AME members live. And again, if you have any questions, yes, okay, Moya, I'm AME too. Proud AME. I feel like if you are AME, it's really hard for you not to be like feeling like you're called to social justice because that was our starting point. But so another thing that's really cool about Running Mate, I won't take up too much more of your time, but another thing that's really cool about Running Mate is not only is a map where you can create your list, your a list of voters in certain areas, certain demographics, but you can turn that list into a phone bank or a canvassing door-to-door packet. And so this is an example of a phone bank packet. Your volunteers, if you have volunteers, you as many of you know, if you do have volunteers, you know that a lot of times you don't want to waste a lot of your volunteers' time. I am always appreciative of the volunteers that have helped me in various campaigns. A lot of times those are our elders or our young folks, our youth in the community that's helping us go door to door and do phone banking. So I always want to make it as streamlined as possible so they don't have to learn a whole tool, download a whole new app, learn all this technology before actually getting started. With Running Mate, you just set up your account and set up your packet, your phone bank packet, and you actually can email a link to that phone bank packet through the system to your volunteers. All they have to do is click the link and open up their phone bank packet right from their phones, no app needed. They can call from their phones by just clicking this button here. We see the first person on our list is Bobby Morton. They have a phone number listed there. You just click that phone number and call and go ahead and get your conversation started. And so you can update this script. This is an example of a script that we have. Um, you can ask them, can we count on your vote on election day or whatever question that you may have and mark if you can count on them or not. The contact list or the password list access is only available to volunteers, but admin, of course, will have a password because we really want to make sure we're protecting that data. And last but not least is our canvassing feature. So if you were canvassing with Running Mate, this is kind of what your map would look like. It shows the street that you're on, the houses that are nearby, and things of that nature. This is an example of what your volunteer would see, or your staff would see if they were going door-to-door canvassing. You have the voter here, Jessica Ross, their address, their registration status, and race, sex, age, things of those nature, their past voting history. So when you talk to them, you have all the information you need. You can just start that conversation by clicking Start Conversation. If it wants to work today. Okay, let me refresh. And excuse my delay. I think it might be the rain in Georgia that is getting the best of me. Okay, let me pull back up this canvassing packet. Same person, start conversation, and boom, you can start a conversation with her. Again, all her demographic breakdown is here on the left-hand side. Your script, hi, my name is Enchanta. I am with the Louisiana Alliance. Is Jessica home? Talk to Jessica. This one in particular is just talking about what type of issues the community is interested in. So if you're doing various campaigns about various different issues, you can have your script say that. Again, can we count on your vote in the upcoming election? Or if they're not registered, you can add little prompts for your volunteers to do X, Y, and Z, whatever you want them to do while they're at the doors. Admin will also have access to a goal tracker. So they'll be able to track all the volunteers' engagement, who people are talking to, go back to those voters if they like, those different things. Again, whether you use Running Mate or you use a different tool, I just highly encourage people, especially in this day and age where there's so much to do and so little time to do anything. You always want to just make sure that your volunteers and your staff are leaving even better than they came. And that's part of that is making sure that we make things as simple and easy as possible for them to set them up for success. And Running Mate helps you do that. So if you're all about strengthening democracy and, trying to make change and in an affordable way, our our smallest plan is $50 a month, and that's for like a school district. So we specialize in down ballot races. So if you're doing school district, utility board, congressional race, council races, those are what we specialize in. We have those shape files, and they're as little as $50 a month. And with the code, SOJO26, you'll get half off. Um, so yeah, that's my little spiel. Thank you so much, Chad, for letting me hop on and share that. I'll drop the code in the chat. You can also just check out the simulator if you just want to look and see what it looks like. Thank you so much, Carla. Carla is also part of our team. Thanks, Carla, for joining. She's part of our marketing team. She leads marketing for Running Mate, but she dropped the link in the chat if you want to try out our little simulator. We call it Whoville internally. It's like a fake. Anyway, uh, Chad is looking like, okay, girl, wrap it up. But yeah, you can just use the simulator. And again, feel free to reach out to me on that Running Mate email, or I'll also drop in my personal email if you just want to stay connected.
Yeah, so one of the things I wanted to make sure to highlight is the fact that this is a tool that works not only for like large campaigns, large national campaigns, but something that can allow churches, organizations, any institution to stay engaged beyond the large federal campaigns. It's also a 501(c)(3) tool, and it's a little bit more simplified than the typical voter engagement tools that we see from like larger institutions. So, um, just wanting to think through in ways in which we build power, and part of that is about making sure we demonstrate to decision makers that we can move the people that they care about. And so canvassing and making sure we're getting out into our community is a big part of that. So I wanted to make sure to share and lift up that as well. And if you're in any coalitions, everyone doesn't have resources. So finding different ways in order to share resources is also really important. So I wanted to make sure to lift up that piece as well. But before we get into our next part, there we go. I'm going to go ahead and reshare here on our presentation. So again, if you have any questions about canvassing, Running Mate, please feel free to ask, and then we're going to continue. Enchanta's going to continue to join us for the rest of our presentation here as we go into detail around some of the more recent developments when it comes to elections. So one of the things that we want to make sure that we're doing when we're thinking about reaching out to folks is thinking about our Secretary of States, sheriffs, local election officials to demand that they pledge to protect the ballot. Doing this can allow us to again demonstrate to our decision makers that we're paying attention and we want to make sure that they're doing the right thing. In order to do this, you can call or email their offices and speak with them or a member of their staff. You can also utilize Zoom in order to hold virtual meetings that are long distance. And then we want to make sure remember that you share where you live and what issues you'd like to discuss when connecting with offices. Um, and a part of this approach is the same approach that we're taking when we're thinking through target meetings, and it really allows you to like hone your messaging when you're thinking about how you're talking to people in the community as well. So that's some those are a few tips. As someone who's been on a few target meetings yourself, and China, do you would you want to add anything when you're thinking about what it looks like when you're reaching out and talking to people, both decision makers and people within the community?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think definitely make like when you're reaching out trying to talk to people, making it as easy as a lift as possible to be able to take action and also going where the people are. So sometimes we want to bring the people to us, but a lot of times it's best to just go where the people already are, where they're already convening, so you don't have to have them, come to you necessarily. And doing a lot of digital engagement is a great way to go where the people are.
No, I think that's absolutely right. And so some of the language we can use when we're talking to people, either decision makers or people in the community. Hello, my name is Chad. I'd like to schedule some time with someone on the staff to discuss recent changes to voting districts or mail-in balloting processes or anything of the nature and how they may affect our community. One thing we want to make sure that we're doing is emphasizing the moral commitment to helping people that we have when we're thinking about reaching out. I also want to make sure to lift up. There was a question earlier around some of the data, and so some of the we want to make sure we're using trusted data sources. So things like voter files, things from research outfits are really important. But we're going to get into that in a little bit more detail here in just a moment. One of the things we want to make sure we're emphasizing in our messaging is everyone's right to dignity embodied in political representation and making sure everyone has the resources they need to actually have political representation. And so we're going to talk about um, the way to emphasize and frame the fact that as someone spoke to earlier, not everyone has access to easy access to the ballot place as they had before, and so we want to make sure that that's being emphasized that a lot of these decisions aren't frictionless, but actually work to like box people out of the process. And so as faith leaders, we have a moral call to demand that everyone is given opportunity for political representation, and that means in every way. We want to make sure that we're not boxing people out. Um, we want to make sure to emphasize that the changes in protections for representation will make our country less democratic at the city, state, and national level. And we want to make sure that people are protecting representation in true democracy for everyone. Um, I think often we shy away from moral language, but I think there is some real powerful clarity in making sure to be very clear in why these things are important. Um, I know that's a big part of what we're looking to do as far as making sure that we get as many people to the polls as possible in this upcoming election. All right, so one of the things that's very important, and I think that was lifted up pretty effectively a little bit earlier today in is looking at your particular context. I want to make sure to pause here so that folks can kind of share some of the things that they're thinking about when they think when we see some of the changes that are happening. Earlier there was uh, the point lifted up around rural areas not having as easy access to the ballot as other places. And so I want to make sure to stop here and ask you about like your particular context. What does voting look like where you live? Is it easy? Is it difficult? Is it fraught? Somewhere in between? Please feel free to add it in the chat there. in order to help folks. Think here's a few prompts. So what are some of the things that make your community special? What are some of the concerns you have about your community, particularly around voting? And then where do you see yourself within the larger network of your community? Moya in suburban Maryland says it's easy for her to get to the polls, and that's great. Andrea says it's she's close to a polling place, but they have friends who live in a county that does not have a polling place, which is interesting. In Oregon, there's 100% mail-in voting for the past 20 plus years. Concerns about how the USPS may obstruct that. And Courtney's lifting up concerns around interference at the polls, and we're going to make sure to lift up opportunities for folks, particularly people of faith, to get involved as as poll chaplains, but also folks to volunteer directly as poll workers as well. Bay Area, Tony DeGrew says that folks in the Bay Area can vote as mail as many do in the community. And then Chi says that in the congressional district they're okay, but they're worried about the polarization in congressional district 17. I really appreciate that. I think, again, being particular when discussing some of the issues and concerns you have around voting can be very powerful when talking to decision makers. You know, 9 times out of 10, they've heard from people like me who work in organizations around some of these concerns. But when they hear from community members, church leaders, people that they see as like vital to their particular communities, then that makes all the world of difference when it comes to people deciding whether or not they can address or whether or not they'll address concerns. Audrey saying we don't have enough participation in DC communities that could actually benefit from policy changes. Uh, and I like to provide evidence of what may change by voting. I think that's also really important. It's you know not enough to connect to people on the abstract basis of hey, voting is important, so you should do it. But being able to point to concrete material changes that people can make when it comes to voting, by voting, I think is very important. Um, I want to make sure to, yeah, pause to lift up that particular point, as is very essential when, particularly when talking to people within the community about why it's important that they participate in this upcoming election. So I really appreciate your contribution there. All right. So as we're continuing to talk to folks, we want to make sure that we're using as much reliable information as possible. So that means we want to make sure that we're using not only organizations like the Brennan Center and other organizations that are focused around voting, places like the NAACP, places that have a pretty good track record, but we want to make sure we're using our local papers, our civic leaders, and our community leaders as we do so as well. We want to make sure we're getting voices that are typically ignored into the process. And doing this consistently is morally right in order to make sure that we have as representative of a government as possible, but we also want to make sure that we're bringing new people into the process by making sure that they're being heard and listened to, and that we're talking to them in a manner that's knowledgeable. All right. And so Courtney just lifted up folks who want to train on in for election day as being either poll chaplains or volunteering directly there in the chat. Please feel free to click on that link in order to get involved. We'll also make sure to share the link once we finish up our presentation today. So we'd like to go ahead and jump into, and then Carla, if you like, would also love to follow up with you around, yeah, some of the challenges you're having there in North Carolina. Uh, but let's go ahead and jump right into a closer discussion around what's happening um, around these particular issues. So, with racial gerrymandering, again, as we've seen since Calais versus Louisiana, history is repeating with efforts at the federal level in Tennessee, Louisiana, Alabama, other places, as a rapid attack on Black representation at the federal level that really hasn't been seen since the onset of Jim Crow. Uh, un so this has been an unfortunate development, but we want to make sure to lift up the fact that vulnerable communities will be hit the hardest here. So people who've already been suffering the most will continue to do so in a manner that's exaggerated. Communities that are historically marginalized will start to lose gains from the increase in representation that they were able to earn. And while federal elections will be first, the effects here will be wide ranging. So, races like school boards, municipal election, county elections will be affected by this decision. And it'll mean that people will lose resources directly. I think connected to our larger conversation around representation in elections, I think this is of a piece with some of what we're seeing with the push for white Christian nationalism across the board by redefining who gets to be a part of the body politic, redefining who gets to be a part of the electorate. I want to make sure to pause here. I'm not sure if Enchanta may have had to step away. But if anybody wants to, yeah. So Enchata's here. So what we wanted to make sure to add is, particularly as someone who, with your background as an AME and with your long time work to think of, to just if there's anything here around racial gerrymandering that you want to make sure to add, as we're losing representation for Black folks across the board.
It's definitely a challenging situation. It's just a reminder of the importance of having space to do strategy and brainstorm ways to fight against gerrymandering, not only within your coalitions, but also with those who do hold power, those who are decision makers. So making sure you're doing your power mapping to see who you have in your network that are decision makers that can help bring about change. So not only relying on your field strategy, but also your overall campaign strategy as well. Understanding what racial gerrymandering is. Some areas are having these like teach-ins where they're bringing people together to help educate them on a lot of these issues. Sometimes it can be a little embarrassing it can feel a little embarrassing when you aren't the expert of a certain topic. But, you know, you can't know everything. And if you do know a lot of things, it's important to share that knowledge with the next person. And so I definitely think having some of those teachings, sharing knowledge, and bringing people together to strategize around this racial gerrymandering is super important these days in Tennessee, Louisiana, Alabama, but a lot of other places. At Running Mate, we've had to quickly update our shapefiles because the districts are changing so rapidly. So not only is gerrymandering just hurting the voters in general, but also the tools that you're using to engage your community are even being impacted as well because we have to make sure our data is updated and there's no clear instruction coming from somewhere at the top to help us do that. But we are working around the clock to make sure those shape files are good and ready to go.
And that's one of the things I definitely want to make sure to emphasize is that one of the key tools or key methods in order to defeat some of this gerrymandering is simply getting more people out in order to just kind of thwart the way in which they're drawing the maps in order to kind of reduce representation. They're making assumptions based on the last election, right? And so with the changing of terrain, some of these efforts could be thwarted simply by getting more people to the polls in order to make sure that they're as represented as possible. So that's really vital in order to make sure that we send the message that you're not allowed to choose your voters. As an elected official, your voters get to choose who represents them. So that racial gerrymandering there. I want to make sure to pause because it could be quite confusing and make ask if there's any questions, comments, concerns, so that before we move forward to the next particular issue. If not, we'll jump to mail-in balloting. And so in many states, we're seeing attempts to restrict access to the ballot through mail. Um, State decisions, along with statements from like the Postmaster General, inject another degree of uncertainty into our elections. And so we want to make sure that we have clarity for our communities and to offer assistance to as many people as possible. So it's going to look very different in different states, right? In Oregon, there is a culture and a lot of infrastructure for mail-in balloting. Whereas in other states there may not be. So we want to make sure we're very clear on what you can and can't do when it comes to mail-in balloting in your particular state. But we also want to make sure we're being cognizant of changes within the postal system on how they're going to handle mail-in ballots um, in the run-up to the election, so that we can make sure that people have as good as good information as possible, and make sure as many people's ballots are counted as possible. And so it's going to be very context dependent, but it's also, I think, one of the mechanisms through which we have to be very, very vigilant in order to make sure that people have an opportunity to exercise their right to vote. I want to make sure to pause there uh, uh, in order to give people any opportunity to react, any information they may have that they may want to share. I also want to lift up within the chat, Sojo Action is co-hosting a cohort next month for BIPOC clergy members to learn more about it, which can really help us to talk and walk through some of the racial gerrymandering and navigating that in the current moment. Please feel free to click it there in the chat. All right. So some other developments we're seeing is the SAVE Act and other restrictions attempting to be passed. The Trump administration is continuing to pass elements of the SAVE Act. We've recently gotten reporting that through the reconciliation process and promises made from Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, that they're going to attach elements of the SAVE Act to many, or if not all, of the must pass, quote unquote, must pass bills that they have in the offing. And so we want to make sure we're being cognizant of these continued efforts to impose things like voter ID, proof of citizenship across the country in a way that violates some of the sovereignty of our electoral system and our electoral processes. As these developments continue, we're going to see a lot of misinformation and disinformation pertaining to the SAVE Act. Talking points such as, why is it so hard to get an ID? Without acknowledging that not everyone has access or easy access to either changing their ID if they need to do so in order to change their name, or even obtaining one if they may not be in a position to do so. So we want to make sure that we're continuing to emphasize the principle of everyone having access to the ballot, regardless of their financial situation, whether or not they change their names, and those other barriers people are attempting to put up through legislation like the SAVE Act. We also want to make sure to be cognizant of the fact that the Trump administration continues to try and tie funding and use other coercive methods in order to get voter rolls, complete access to the voter rolls that states may have. And we want to make sure we're messaging to folks that they should not, that these attempts haven't been successful, and also message that these are attempts in order to intimidate folks away from the polls. And so we want to use a language of resiliency, a language of strength in order to make sure that folks are not intimidated by some of these moves. Similarly, firing election advisory board members has been a recent move of the Trump administration. And once again, these moves aren't meant to intimidate. But we want to make sure that people are confident in being able to exercise their right to the franchise moving forward. Um, but most importantly, I want to say amidst all of these changes, that it's important that we excuse me, local election workers as much as possible. They're going to need more support now more than ever. There's fewer financial resources, and there's going to be more scrutiny in the run to elections. And so here's also where I'd like to lift up some of the poll chaplain training that we're having with folks across the board. We had one yesterday. We're going to continue to have those. We're going to make sure to share information around the poll chaplain trainings. We're also going to make sure to continue to share information around volunteering as a poll worker in case you want to work directly as a poll worker, and not in a poll chaplain capacity. Courtney's just added to our chat here opportunities to serve as a poll chaplain as well. And Andrea, thank you for sharing that information around voting rights and voting rights and disabilities with in regard to the SAVE Act. We'll make sure to share that amongst our resources once the webinar ends. So no pressure, Enchanta. Is there anything you'd like to add here?
No, no, nothing to add on my end.
Okay. All right. So what do we want to say? We want to make sure, in regard to all of this, we want to express our concern with the changes in how we practice democracy, and we want to make sure we stay engaged and open to discussing community issues that are important to us in order to kind of translate some of the risks we're seeing through some of these attacks on our right to vote. So how can we say it best? We want to make sure we start from a space of shared values, lead with what we know, and be confident in our place in knowing those things, and then listen actively for new information or possibilities. Are there any fixes or upcoming decisions that can help? How do we see these changes being implemented, and what are we concerned about? What are alternatives we see to addressing these issues? Again, when we're talking to people, either as canvassers, volunteers, or even when we're talking to decision makers, we want to make sure to center some of these. We want to make sure to, again, center shared values. We want to make sure to be solution oriented, and then point out the ways, what we're arguing for is going to be a solution for some of the concerns that people may have, um, while doing so. Seeing a question here from Audrey. Is there a way to learn in real time about what's threatening our communities as voting takes place? Perhaps a coalition as a community to be proactive across our work before other counterproductive messaging is delivered. That's a great question. And part of that is going to be, so there's going to be a larger, national infrastructure of people monitoring election threats in real time. But it's important to replicate some of these systems at the local level as well. You want to make sure the folks that you're volunteering with, the folks that you're working with, are being communicative, particularly in real time. If you have someone who is driving the van that's taking the voters to the polls and they're finding that, hey, this polling place is turning a lot of people away, or hey, there are a lot of people outside of this polling place and it seems to be a bit of a tense situation. You want to make sure that communicate that to people as quickly as possible within your community, and then allow that to be lifted up to folks who may be able to help, particularly on the legal side, but also community leaders who can try and get things addressed as quickly as possible as well. But that's a great question, Audrey, and I really appreciate it. All right. So what do we do next? So we're gonna have oh, this we're gonna there will be report back forms. When dealing with decision makers, you do want to leave a note of thanks. But we also want to make sure to continue to monitor and share information that's going to be useful with, again, both our volunteers and decision makers. So why are we doing this? I want to say that throughout the Bible, we're met with examples of people taking direct action and intervening when they see or know something to be unjust. In particular, within our particular context, I think a really good example of this is the civil rights movement and the fighting and organizing that was necessary in order to make sure that everyone had the opportunity or right to representation. Um, but I want to make sure that we emphasize that within our faith context, we are called to move directly to action when it comes to issues of social justice. Kind of similar to what Enchanta was speaking to earlier, as an AME. I think that's true for folks of across faith traditions. All right. So a lot of churches already lead programs that help people exercise their right to vote. Again, Souls to the Polls, uh, serving as poll chaplains, serving as community hubs of information for people who are looking to navigate the ballot, um, are all important ways in which we can help as church, as faith leaders. Not only people within the church, but people of across faiths. Um, I want to make sure to pause there. I've been talking a little bit fast, talking a little bit much. Is there anything that folks may want to can think of how else we can help within this current moment before we delve into a little bit of the challenges to representation and then wrapping up? All right. I do want to kind of outline the ways that some of these election challenges dovetails with some of the things we've been seeing lately in regards to things like birthright citizenship, and in white Christian nationalism in general. Um, so these recent changes, we can look forward to intensifying efforts to prevent people from accessing the ballot. That's what attempts to get voter rolls are about. That's what efforts to get voter ID is about. Um, and we want to make sure we counsel and partner with people who would otherwise struggle navigating in this moment. So, folks who may not have a regular practice of voting, folks who may not have a regular practice of finding a polling place, folks who may not have an eligible form of voter ID in your particular state, or we want to make sure that we are giving these people as many resources as possible in order to prevent them from being blocked from the ballot. And so we want to make sure we're being thoughtful as we do so. So this means reaching out to unregistered voters. This means reaching out to people in the community who you may not be as directly connected with. This may be reaching out to people or talking to people within your church who you may not be cognizant of having issues with these particular problems. And so being very open-minded, being a place that people can really trust is really important there. And that means being consistent and also, again, showing interest in reaching out. So yeah, we want to make sure as many people as possible are getting the help they need. I also want to say that this is all a part of a larger effort, most recently seen in challenges to birthright citizenship in the Supreme Court, by challenging the very concept of getting to count as an American from our just soil citizenship model to the just blood model that many other countries use. Um, we have to think, as Anna Law says, she's a scholar on birthright citizenship. We must ask whose blood would count when we think about blood as the thing that's going to confer citizenship. And I say, as Christians, we must uphold the principle that we are all of the same blood, right? We should not be dividing ourselves by, this person belongs here because they were born to this particular lineage, and that person doesn't. We want to make sure that we're acknowledging and recognizing that we're, the spark of the divine in each and every one of us. Um, but I want to pause there and just to make sure that makes sense. But also, Enchanta, is there anything you want to add here?
I don't have anything to add. I'm going to drop in the chat. Kelly Douglas Brown, she's a womanist theologian. She talks a lot about this, whose blood, whose death matters, those sorts of things, and puts it in a theological framework. So if people are interested, I'll just share that in the chat.
See, that's awesome. This is why it's always good to have a seminarian on the webinar. Uh, all right, and so we can get once again, we're poll chaplain training. We want to make sure that voter protection is free, fair, in a safe election. You can help protect vulnerable voters, and you know as we said, this battle is too big for any one racial, ethnic, or faith group to fight alone. So it's going to be interfaith. Our next training will be September 28th. We had a training yesterday that went really well. So we want to make sure to continue to build momentum and get as many people as possible involved in making sure that we have a free and fair elections coming up this fall. Voter protection toolkits. We want to make sure that we're going to share resources from organizations like Issue One, like the folks at Good Trouble Live On, in order to make sure we're supporting election workers, stopping disinformation, and standing with election officials. And then I want to make sure to pause here and ask you all, what are other ways people can help? I also want to answer a question that was really good earlier around, or attempt to answer a question around uh emphasizing the folks the importance of voting. Someone asked, how can we make sure to communicate folks why it's important to vote when we may not have the yeah, so there was a question, words of encouragement to give to undocumented folks who are doing social justice. um Sorry, excuse me. Looking to engage voters, let them know how important voting is, as someone that cannot, but maybe experiencing burnout with, particularly under this administration. And I think a really good answer here is by making sure to share some of that personal. I understand it can be tough and it can be emotionally challenging, in order to particularly during moments of burnout, in order to kind of share what you're going through and how you're feeling. But I think it's important that people understand why it's important to you, so it can be really critical in order to kind of really communicate why their vote is vital for your community, and how, even though that you don't have the ballot, um, we're all in this together, right? And so you need them to step forward in order to protect the community that you all are a part of together. And as you're doing the work, that not only is it important that they show up when it's time to march, not only is it important when to show up when it's time to um protest, but it's also important to try and do some of the more quotidian things in order to make sure people have as much protection as possible. So that was a great question. I wanted to make sure to try and address that before we wrapped up here. I also want to pause to see if there are any other questions I may have missed here. Um, Audrey, oh, we answered that about real-time threats. So I'm not seeing any other questions here in the chat. I do want to lift up what others are doing. We have Mighty Networks. Courtney's going to share the link for that a little bit later. I mean, after this webinar, sorry, excuse me, in order to make sure people can continue to discuss the ways we can act and work together across the country. We're going to share a list of resources from partners, and yeah, order to continue this conversation around both engaging our decision makers around what's important and how they can change things, but also making sure that our communities are as prepared as possible for some of these policy changes as well. Um, I really appreciate you all taking the time today. Once again, wants to thank Enchanta. Ask, is there anything else you want to share? Anything you want to plug before we say goodbye?
No, nothing else on my end. Thank you so much for allowing us to join. And please, again, feel free to reach out to me if anyone wants to talk more about campaign strategy and how they can use Running Mate to target their demographic. Email address is runningmate-support@civitech.io. I'm also going to just redrop the link in the chat if folks want to get on our simulator. But yeah, thank you so much, Chad, for having us, and it was great meeting everyone.
No, of course. I really appreciate you joining us. And I want to make sure to again thank everybody for joining us. And you're going to get an email from Courtney once this wraps up. And while we're facing a lot of challenges, I think together we can make sure that we overcome them. And so thank you, and you all, everyone have a great day.